He's Jim Stewart, I'm Rick Collins, and this is Off the Bench. So, we're doing our first NFL review. It was week 1 this weekend, and there were some hit and misses on games.
I think this is just another year in almost a tradition after the new CBA of just these teams are coming into the season rusty. And to be honest, the fact that they can't put on pads but like 4 or 5 times during training camp. And it's really offensive and defensive lineman play that has really gotten ridiculous, and more so on the offensive side.
Yeah.
Defensive linemen, all you have to do is get someone really angry who has some skill and against a dummy and then sick them on someone. It's the offensive line that really is
Getting
the one
used
that
to contact and punching guys.
It's continuity. It's being able to communicate. It's if I go this way, you go that way, and you really can't walk through that. You have to go through drills, and that's why in the 70s, 80s, and 90s they did 3-a-days, almost 3-a-days. It's 2-a-days, and then sometimes 3-a-days of in pads. They were barely ever not in pads unless it was a walkthrough for the day before.
Well, the rust definitely showed for a few teams. The Bills and Jets, both going into the season, we knew it was going to be a little rough for them this year. But
we didn't know it was going to be that rough.
There's really nothing we could say about that game. It was terrible. And everybody knew the Jets were, quote-unquote, tanking this year because they really have not had solid quarterback play for a while. And the Bills, we knew were going to struggle a little bit. Tyrod Taylor's been injured most of the preseason. You know what? It's not even really worth talking about. Let's just move on.
Yeah, I mean, the really funny part is now everybody's talking about how Tyrod Taylor looks really good, but it was against the Jets. So you can't really
let's wait for week 2 on both of these teams because I don't think we learned anything about either of those teams.
I think outside the
week.
Cowboys, I think the matchup of the weekend was Packers-Seahawks. That was a fight.
Well, not only that, but I think it was the only game that really down the road will matter for a lot of these teams because, week 1, the guys are just trying to get their feet under them, get into the season, try and stay healthy. Obviously, not a lot of teams were successful in doing that. But in this game, you could see that both of these teams have a playoff future this year, we think. And the winner was going to get the leg up in getting home field advantage in the playoffs.
I see this as more of things have really changed in the NFL when it comes to rivalries. Okay, it used to be you would get a fight or two in the Giants-Cowboys.
Yeah.
Or Redskins-Eagles. You would get these massive fights because they hated each other. Now, it seems like the Packers-Seahawks has become the biggest rivalry other than maybe Baltimore-Pittsburgh in the NFL, and it makes no sense because they're in completely different divisions.
Well, I think it's because they seem to play each other in the playoffs every year.
And they're all epic games.
Yes. And this was, it didn't have the scoring that you would expect from a Green Bay Packers-Seattle Seahawks game, but the defenses showed up big time in this game.
And which is really surprising on the Green Bay side. Either that or the
I
Seahawks.
picked them for my fantasy defense, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, last year they were 22nd in the league. This year, they're acting like a top 5 defense, and it's insane because the number 1 defense is the Seahawks. They brought in Sheldon Richardson in the offseason, which was a huge...
They had the names, but, with...
And it was only for like a 6th-round pick.
But the problem they had was they were playing probably the best offensive team in the NFC. Maybe arguably top 3 in the NFC. When you're playing against top 3 in the NFC, if you can only score 9 points, you're going to be in trouble, no matter how good your defense is.
Why don't we move on? Falcons-Bears. Don't care?
Don't really. I mean, neither of these teams really had anything to play for. Honestly, the Falcons, they're gonna have games like this they can walk through, and the Bears are done. So.
But Falcons went to the Super Bowl last year, and they struggled with the Bears. They only won by 6 points, under a touchdown.
Let's wait till they play somebody legit.
Okay, Cardinals-Detroit.
So actually, I really like this game because I think both of these teams make the playoffs. And I actually think the Cardinals have a decent shot of moving pretty far into the playoffs. Detroit is the sneaker team, which nobody is really picking right now to get into the playoffs. I think they get in as a wild card. They may end up winning the division. I know that sounds crazy when you got the Packers and the Vikings, but
Then there was the big stinker of the afternoon on Sunday, and that was Bengals Ravens. I've never seen Andy Dalton had a QB rating of .7. It's the lowest QB rating since they started taking QB ratings.
rating. I mean, it's embarrassing for him, but it's really embarrassing for the league because Andy Dalton has been pumped up as being a top 10 quarterback in the league. And to go out and throw 4 interceptions, not get a touchdown, and not even be able to get your team in position to put any points on the board, that's embarrassing for the league.
But see, I also think is embarrassing is the fact that right in their own division is Steelers-Browns, and Kaiser almost pulled it out, which is amazing because he was supposed to be a development player, someone who out of Notre Dame, Brian Kelly said, I wouldn't start him. He should have stayed a year.
Yeah.
But he had lost his his starting.
He had to.
He lost his starting role as a Golden Domer quarterback.
Yeah.
He had to go to the NFL, and it just amazes me that he was able to pull off what he did.
You know, I don't think the Steelers' defense is really as tough as it has been in the past.
They're
Obviously,
old.
adding T.J. Watt is huge for them, and he's going to be a great player. I think, you know, if he becomes anything close to his brother, he'll be phenomenal, right? He's going to be a top defensive player in the league. But their defense overall has been getting older and older. And maybe they're just not as good as we think they are. And the offense struggled a lot. The Steelers' offense against the Browns should have just decimated them.
When your number one attraction on your defense, which is supposed to be one of the top in the NFL, is a 39-year-old James Harrison who can bench a lot of weight and move a lot of stuff in social media videos, that's a little scary. They don't have any big-name players on these defenses anymore. There is no not TJ Houshmandzadeh, but Troy Polamalu. There is no,
Not for them.
No, there isn't for them. And again, off the top of my head, it's been so long that I can't think of anybody other than Troy Polamalu and James Harrison. Their defense has fallen apart, and the only thing keeping them active are Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Ben Roethlisberger. And that's it. There isn't much outside
And
of
that's
that.
really good, but clearly Cleveland's defense is better than we thought because they were able to stifle that offense and at least keep the game close. But honestly, the Steelers, again, I think like the Falcons, they're going to be able to push into the playoffs near the end of the season. I'm not too concerned about them. This is one of those games where you're playing against a team that everybody knows is terrible. So you just kind of go, oh, we're going to walk in and walk all over them, and it doesn't happen.
Speaking of close games, what about Jacksonville Texans?
So the poor Texans, Savage, I knew he was going to be on a short leash this year, but man, I did not realize that after one half of NFL football this year, he was going to be done. There is no way that guy sees the playing field again this year. Deshaun
Nope.
Watson is the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans.
And I think that's the best way they could go because he is the future anyway.
Absolutely.
Savage was just the go-between for 1 year. Brian Kelly really is on the hot seat now because when he was at Purdue, his whole reputation was he was a quarterback coach. He's the one that made Hackenberg look like an NFL prospect.
Yeah.
And then he goes down to the Texans and has Brock Osweiler was his first pick. They gave a first-round draft pick to get him, and they paid him a lot. No, they didn't give him a draft pick. Sorry, they paid him a lot of money.
Yeah.
$64
They signed
million
him to a bunch of money, yeah.
guaranteed. Then they let him go after a year, shows how much they wanted him. Then they brought in Hoyer. Then they had Savage. And now they have
Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson looked like the real deal. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a pass. I think they had to go that way. Let's go to a couple of the last games. One was the Raiders against Tennessee. I think the Raiders showed who they are, which is a very good defensive team and an awesome offensive team. That's why I have Derek Carr winning the MVP, the Offensive Player of the Year. Them getting that win in Tennessee was a huge
And it wasn't
break for them.
just the win, it was how they got the win. They brought in Marshawn Lynch to be that physical presence.
Yeah.
He didn't get more than 70 yards, but
He did what he
it was
needed to
a
do.
smash mouth
Yes.
70 yards.
And then the last game is the Eagles against the Redskins, which the Eagles going into Washington and pulling out a win, especially when they're going to be playing catch up with the Cowboys for most of the season, I think that was a big win for them. Huge loss for Washington.
And I know this might be me going out on a limb, but I think based on the performances of week 1, Carson Wentz is the best quarterback in that division.
Whoa.
By far. I'm sorry, as we'll go in the next segment, Dak did not impress me.
Eli didn't impress
Eli
you?
didn't impress, and
Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins has not been impressive at all either.
Wow. So
you like
Carson
that
Wentz,
is-
you calling him your NFC Player of the Year?
Yeah, at this point,
MVP?
yes. But, you know,
Not gonna
how do
go
you
that
like
far.
that? It's not been the call sign so far for the Redskins.
All right, and we'll talk about the Cowboys more after this commercial break. Not the most exciting game in the world, Cowboys and Giants last night. Really, I would say even kind of a stinker, but as a Cowboys fan, a win's a win. I'll take it.
And this breaks the streak. The last 2 games have been Giants.
Yes.
And the Cowboys now have won in Jerry's world finally against their heated rival. Since they opened, I think they're 2-1, or they're 2-1 when it comes to victories against
No,
Giants.
the Giants, yeah, having 2 victories to the Cowboys,
Yeah,
one
now,
at home.
And now it really shows that they're a little bit more balanced offense than they even showed last year, because even though this is Dak's second year, I do believe he struggled. He struggled again. The same problems they had last year are the same problems they had this year. He struggles to throw the ball down the field. He only averaged 5.9 yards per attempt.
I think the aspect of his passing that's gotten better is finding guys. He did a great job of doing that last year. I'm not putting that down on him at all. But this year, he seems to be finding the really open guy more often than sneaking a ball past a defender like he did last year quite a bit.
But last night, Witten was completely open in the back of the end zone. He missed him.
Yeah.
So what I think is happening is I think there's been a lot of pressure. I don't think he's the type of quarterback who has ever been told or needed to throw down the field. And now with Zeke, people have told him, hey, you don't have to worry about it. And even though they've worked on it in the offseason, I do think that throwing the ball down the field is more of a skill than people get laid on. I mean, it is an instinct-driven ability to throw down the field, because everything else is timing.
Yeah.
But with throwing the ball down the field, you not only have to have timing, because the timing is thrown off. They're streaking, and half the time you have to make time for yourself by scrambling, and then throwing downfield. You have to throw a receiver open. I believe that Carson Wentz,
Even Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins was the best at it last year.
Yeah.
And people like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and guy from San Diego. I mean LA now.
Oh, well, yeah, Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers. Those are that is really the standard of throwing the ball down the field. And Dak just wasn't that. He wasn't that in college. He isn't that in the pros. And the problem
Yet.
is going to be but the problem's going to be, it's only been one game. They were rusty. I want to see if he can throw the ball down the field before I anoint him a franchise player.
Well, I hope he does. I've got Dez on my fantasy team, so I would like to see him throw the ball down the field a little bit more, because that means more balls to Dez.
And Dez really struggled last night too.
He had 9 passes thrown his way and only 2 catches. And,
For 48 yards.
and that's good. Good
And that
yardage
was
per
one
catch.
38-yard catch.
Yeah, one of it was quite a bit of it. But the problem is 9 passes thrown his way, and he's only getting 2 of those. if you look at the highlights, a lot of it was, well, Janoris Jenkins being one of the best defensive backs in the league.
Jackrabbit.
Yeah, and that certainly makes it more difficult. But a lot of it, I just think that Dak is not putting in the ball in the right places for Dez to catch it, and Dez isn't necessarily getting in the right position to make those
But
plays.
Dez has never been a separation wide receiver.
No,
he's been
he's-
an overpower wide receiver. If you watch his first 8 years in the league, he was the kind of guy that would jump body to body, reach up and grab the ball. He was not a Jordy Nelson. He wasn't a Deshaun Jackson that just pulled away from people.
One thing we talked about before the season started was, would Ryan Switzer's addition to the offense take away passes from Jason Witten? That didn't happen last night. Jason Witten had quite a few passes thrown his way, and in fact got a touchdown.
And he broke the record.
Yeah, he
is
broke
now
the receiving record.
He is now the number one receiver in the history of the Cowboys when it comes to yardage.
Correct.
But I was really surprised in the fact that we didn't see Ryan Switzer very often. Other than punts. You didn't see him very often.
No, and I think what you'll see is they'll slowly work him into the offense. You know, I think a lot of people thought, wow, he's going to be out there, every other play. He's going to get 20 plays in his first game. It doesn't look like it's going to go that way. It looks
Especially
like,
with Cole Beasley catching balls on the back of his jersey, making some of the best cover corners look silly. He has an unbelievable route runner.
it's going to be difficult, and Ryan Switzer certainly shares a lot of the same skill set as Beasley, but I think they can get them both out there. I think you'll see them both out there together, and you'll see Switzer taking Beasley's place often. I'm just not sure if it's going to happen as regularly as I think Cowboys fans would hope for.
I thought I was going to see a bit of an offense switch between the two lineups. When Zeke's in, I thought it was going to be more power running up the gut. And then when Ryan Switzer was in, I thought they would take Zeke out and they'd run more of a Patriot offense. Two short, quick wide receivers, one tall or speedy outside receiver, and possibly even another one on the other side, Terrence Williams. But they didn't.
They don't want to take Zeke out of that offense right now, and I think part of that is, look, while you got him, use him, because they don't know when he's going to go away.
And there's been a lot of talk that they want to run him into the ground this year because they feel he's going to have a 6-week break next year.
Next year, yeah, to begin the season. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way it goes. Let's also look at how bad the Giants' offense is on the other side.
And I really would put the hero of the game being the defensive line. They did great last year, though they were taking advantage and were victimizing the rookie Flowers.
Yes.
That guard was terrible.
Yes, that offensive line right now is in shambles. Can they pull it together? Maybe there's skill there, but right now they look really bad.
Lawrence and Charles Tapper did a great job pressuring the quarterback. Lawrence had 2 sacks.
And
Charles
Tapper with
had
1.
Yeah, and Taco with 1, and Charles Tapper had 1 sack. That was a huge sack, by the way. They were in their own red zone.
Yeah, he almost was it inside the 5.
Yeah, he smothered Eli Manning. The whole thing just blew up, and that sort of turned the tables a little bit on the ability of the Giants to be able to come back.
Well, that was a lot of
ended
the
it.
momentum killers, and the Giants were able to move the ball. It wasn't that they weren't able to move the ball. Eli Manning almost had 300 yards passing. It was they couldn't convert on third downs when they needed to convert to get into position to kick a field goal or get into the red zone for the Cowboys defense. And then also, they just struggled when they needed to just be able to move the ball, period. They couldn't run the ball. That was the biggest problem.
Can we really point out the elephant in the room? Without Odell Beckham Jr. there, their offense is nothing. Even though they brought in Brandon Marshall, they really couldn't take the coverage off of Brandon Marshall. And even though the new tight end out of Ole Miss had 5 or 6 receptions, he did a good job. But it really tilts the field when Odell Beckham Jr. is out there.
Yeah, and I think also the addition of Odell Beckham out there is a presence that the Cowboys then have to respect That pulls a linebacker out to play on a
Yep.
tight end instead of a safety there because they're having to double on Odell. And that gives more room for running. 10 rushes is never going to win you a football game.
No.
It's
Unless you're the Patriots.
amazing to me that they had 10 rushes by running backs. That's incredible. How do you only have 10 rushes by your running back?
I really think it was they planned on running it, and in the past they have been more of a run team than they were this year. But I think that they changed their game plan when the defensive line and the linebackers for the Cowboys sort of took that
They
option
were just
away.
stacking the box.
And I was really impressed. Jalen Smith did a good job. He was 3 for 3, 3 tackles, 3 assists.
He wasn't phenomenal, but he was very, very
And he
solid.
flashed that ability,
Yes.
that speed and that explosion. You know, that drop foot hasn't infected him as much as people have thought it would be. And I really think that if he can get his confidence back, because that's the real thing. You've come back from injury, I've come back from injury. It's
many
that
times.
fear.
Yeah.
It's that fear that you're going to get hurt again. That even if it's a subconscious fear, that's what prevents you from really unleashing yourself again. And it really takes a bit of time to come back from.
And lastly, before we finish up with this Cowboys-Giants game, the real secret to the Cowboys, Dan Bailey. 4 field goals last night. I mean, we don't even think about it. When the field goal unit goes on the field, it's like an automatic 3 points. It's a secret weapon. It's incredible.
It is incredible, and I really think that this offense might be able to take away some of the problems that the defense could have. They still have problems in defensive backs, but
They
Bailey
lost Scandrick last night. That's
to
going
a
to be
broken
huge.
hand. But I think Bailey's just another weapon that they have now. The question is, I've never really been a big fan of Garrett.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a good coach. He's almost 50. He's almost 500 for his career. Let's see
Could
what
be
he
worse.
can do.
Could be the Browns coach.
But let's see what. But the Browns, it's systemic.
Sure.
But I really want to see: is he able? Is he able
The
to
next
do
step.
something with this team? He hasn't done that. And the fact that they go, oh, we won this many games last year. You won 1 playoff game.
It's
The
that
Pa-
next step in the playoffs.
Yeah, the
That's what they
Packers
need.
do that every year. The New England Patriots do it every year. The Steelers do it every year. Unless you want to be considered one of these teams that are perennial Super Bowl player or Super Bowl possible
Contenders,
champions,
yeah.
contenders, you got to start winning. You can't say, look how many regular season wins we had last year. Because in a lot of sense, even though it means more in the NFL, you got to look at it the same way as LeBron. The regular season doesn't matter other than placing in the
Cowboys in the
playoffs.
Super Bowl or not?
No.
I guess we're both on charge with that. So until next time.